Hey guys, Gene here, and today I'll be showing you how to model a cocktail ring. I'll be using some of the techniques that I use on a daily basis. I'll be using some surface blending tools as well as curve blending techniques as well. I'll be using also a bunch of hotkeys and shortcuts in the process. Again, if you're not familiar with the way I work, please check out some of my previous videos on how to work faster with Rhino. I go over the hotkeys. You can also see how I set up the Rhino interface. Okay, so what I want to do first is build the stone or reference that I'll be modeling the ring. Okay, so what I usually do is I go to usually you'll have a stone already set, but if we're going to do it from scratch, let's go about this way. I'm going to go to the rectangle NURB creator and left click and hold and select the second one. I'm going to go to the center snap and let's go with a I'm going to go with 14 by 10. That's in millimeters. Okay, then we'll go ahead and create the oval. So back to the middle mouse, grab the ellipse diameter. I'm going to snap to each end just to create the actual oval. Then we can delete this rectangle. Okay, so let me just verify the actual length. It says 14 millimeters, so we're good. From here, I'm going to go now and create the finger size because that's the most important part of creating any ring. Go ahead and go to the import, and I usually have a file that has all my CAD parts. Let's see, I'm going to bring in, let's see, size. Most standard ring sizes are between 6 and 7, so let's go ahead and build a size 7 ring. If you don't have that reference, just simply type in diameter of, let's see, 17.3 or 17.2. That's a good way to create your ring guide. Always make sure you have it on the layer that says size, so you don't mistaken it for a curve that you have to delete. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch back to perspective. I'm going to grab the what do you call that, the oval guide here. I'm going to lock everything else. Again, I'm using hotkeys. I'm going to switch to this view with the gumball activated. I'm going to look for this red arc so I can rotate it in this direction. And while I'm rotating, I'm going to hold shift so it snaps. And then you can hold, actually tap alt to create a copy. You can see my cursor, there's a plus sign. Okay, so when I let go with left click, there's a copy. I'm going to go now and rotate the curve that's selected using the green arc. I'm going to hold shift again and tap the alt key so we have it going in the opposite direction, just like this. From here, we can go now and let me see, there you go. So you want to look for this scale toggle here that you see when my mouse is wiggling around. We're going to zoom in, and we wanted to snap to this curve here, but I can't snap to it because there's nothing, there's no reference. I can go into the white ball, go to snappy, but I like to use a hotkey, so I'll hit the S, right click, so snappy is on, and let's just snap it right onto there. Okay, then I'll hit SS twice just to get out of the snappy dragging. I'm going to take the current circle that's selected and I'm going to split it with the curve at the bottom here. I'll do the same for this one. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and create the oval using network surface. We'll select the main oval shape here, then we'll run the split tool. Go ahead and split that into 2 pieces. Then we'll use the hotkey for network surface. Okay, so there we go. Delete my curves. We don't even need the curves anymore. Then from here, we can go ahead and switch to front view. I need to mirror this surface to the bottom, so I'll mirror from 0. Go ahead and select the bottom. I want to scale this surface up so it creates a very low round shape. So I'll use control 1, that is my hotkey for scale 1D, then F4 for 0. You can see where it's referencing to. I'm going to hold the shift key and just pull it up just like this. Okay, and select both. Let's go ahead and join it, and there we go. We have our stone. I'm gonna make a new layer. I'll just do duplicate layer. We'll call it ST for stone. I think everyone knows what ST means. Add it to the layer, then we can change it so it's very distinct. Lavender is a good color. Okay, I kind of wanted to go the normal route where it's what we call fingernail orientation, meaning if you rotate it this way, it looks like it's going along the fingernail's direction, right? From here, we'll go ahead and move this, what do you call that, stone, directly on top of the finger size ring, so we know that it's sitting on the finger. But I don't want it to be that. I kind of want to give some distance between the bottom of the stone and the finger. I don't want it touching for many reasons. Okay, so just use the gumball and we'll type in a number like at least 1. We could try 1.5 and let's just review it real quick. You can always move it later, you know, just get it to a distance you could start with. Alright, and go ahead and save this file because, you know, you never know about Rhino these days. It always tends to crash. Okay, so moving along, I'll go ahead and unlock our scene. I'll select the finger size guide here. I do want to create the curves that will determine the width and the width of the shank. So I usually go with a comfortable size on the side. You never want to go too far out, like 3 or 4 millimeters. It becomes very uncomfortable if you plan to wear this ring every day. So a safe number is anywhere between 2 to 2.5 ish, you know, so let's go with a safe number, 2.5. Okay, and for the bottom I'll do the same thing, but this time I'll go with a distance like 2. I do plan on having this ring accommodate, I want this ring to accommodate a spring guard. The reason why I made 2 is the spring guard is usually a 0.8 to 1 millimeter thick, and they sit it right inside the body here. So you do want to have at least a 1 millimeter or 0.8 thickness of metal for the entire ring. Okay, so that's the reason why I went with at least 2 millimeters. Okay, you don't have to go more than that, to be honest. Moving along, let's go ahead and select that curve. I'm going to turn off the gumball and just mirror that curve to the other side. Again, if you didn't watch my video, I have a hotkey to turn the gumball on and off pretty quickly. Okay, let's go ahead and create the curve using these 3 lines. I'll use a circle with 3 points. Okay, we'll grab each end. And there we go. There is the silhouette of our shank. I'm going to go ahead and delete these curves. From here, let's go ahead and focus now on the perspective view. I'm going to maximize the view. I do want to extract that curve again, so one quick way, just study the surface. If there's no break in line, you can actually go to the duplicate face border, and the curve is right back. I do want to give it a space of 0.15 or 0.2, just so when they cast this ring, you don't have to worry about shrinkage or whatever. At least it has some room to just drop in so they can set it. Okay, from here I do plan on actually what's that word, setting it with some stones. Alright, so we can select this curve here and lock everything else. Switch now to the what's this, the front view. Let's go ahead and bring in a stone. Go down here. If you guys need the actual stone, I could leave a link at the description below. Most of you don't have a stone to work with. You know what, I'll also leave the finger size guide for those that really want to have what I'm using. Okay, so go ahead and let's import this stone. By default, I always bring it in as a large 1 carat. So I'm just going to scale it down. I want to create a square guide here, and we'll go with at least a 1.5. Just go ahead and scale it using the shift key. Okay, so it's proportionally scaling. Alright, go ahead and just slide it up so the girdle is actually sitting on top of the floor. Okay, you don't want it sinking below the floor. It's easy for you to orient it on surfaces or whatnot. Alright, From here, I do want to create the seat it's going to be sitting on, actually the metal. So I usually go with a oval. Just go ahead and just make one anywhere. Before we do that, we do want to establish some standards, especially for the stone setters. I'm going to design it where it's going to be just with conical holes. I'm building it for production, so I'm not going to put any prongs in there or whatnot. So what I usually do is I create a line on one side and I type in like 0.3 at the very minimum, and I'm going to mirror that to the other side, and that's going to be the width of the metal I need to set this stone. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and go with the oval. Actually, I'm sorry, one more thing. I want to create some distance below. A good number is at least 0.4 or 0.5, and these are my guides. Let's go now to the oval tool, just like that. And from here we can hit F10 to pull up the control points, and I'm just going to slide these down, so it's like this. Then I'll grab these two control points here and just move these down. I want to keep my eye on the stone itself. When they're sanding it, you do want to have some meat for them to chip away or cut, create their cut downs and whatnot. So do keep in mind that they do need metal to set this stone. Okay, so I'm just going to go shape it like this. Again, most of you will have your own way of creating your stone layouts and whatnot, but this is what I use, and it works with our team, our workshop. Alright, so that should be great. I'm going to go ahead and just grab everything there and move it up. Again, you want to keep in mind that there is a distance that you need between the stone and the setting here. I'm going to pull this down just like this, and you could actually angle it a little bit. Gives it, you don't have it going just straight up. And you grab this thing here, and I think that should be excellent right there. The next thing I'm going to do is actually create, we can actually delete that curve. I'm going to switch over here, select that oval, and just zoom into it. Again, I'm using a hotkey to zoom into my selection. Check out the video if you're not sure what I'm talking about. Let's go with the line tool again. I'm going to snap it to the center. If I can't find the center, just put it anywhere on that line. And we're going to look for quad, just like that. We'll select the line, hit F10, and I'm going to move it right inside the middle there, just like this. The reason why I did that is because I want to create an actual curve that's going to be the that's going to establish our body here. Okay, let's go ahead and just select the main curve and that line, and I'm going to use a sweep one rail command. I'm going to select that surface, go to duplicate border, and we can hold control and deselect everything else. And I mean, deselect what we want to keep. Everything else is selected. We can go ahead and delete it. Okay, so there we go with that curve. This is going to be the main curve to create the rest of the body. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is actually focus now. We can come back to this stone thing later. So I'm going to go ahead and just isolate just these three curves. We can actually lock everything else. We don't have to hide it. It's not going to be affected in any way. I'm looking at this, and I feel like I do want to create some sort of buke to it, meaning buke means it has that curvature that looks like this. If you see my mouse, I feel like it doesn't have enough height, so I'm going to go ahead and unlock it and just move this thing a little bit higher so it has some distance. Okay. Again, feel free to design it any way you want, as long as you follow these techniques. You might have a different way of making it. We'll start on the left side here. I do want to find some reference points that can guide me to make sure I'm selecting it correctly. To find the exact center point in this quad here, we can go to vertical plane and use intersect just to create that point right there. Okay. We can lock this curve, and we'll go with the circle with 3 tangents. And you can see what I mean by buke. We can actually create the side of that ring just like that. You can see that we're creating this nice little sexy taper that goes up to that surface. I'll go now and just select that curve and delete it with, I split it with that point and this curve. Hold control and deselect just like that. And mirror. Okay, let's go ahead and just save our file. What I want to do now is create the bottom part here, the part that will determine the first half of the top half of this shank here. So let's go with a line from midpoint. You can select that curve and split it with the main this outer curve here. Deselect the inside. Okay. Now we can hide everything else. Lock everything else while it's selected. I'm going to go again with the oval tool, and this is where you can determine how you want it to be designed. If you make it really wide, it's going to create a really wide shank. I'll go with a medium size. Again, this is all up to you. Once you see how it's made, then you'll get the idea. It's pretty straightforward what I'm doing. I'm going to go now and unlock our scene. We'll select this main curve here, and I'm going to run the split tool with these two as my cutters. We'll keep this part, and now we'll just keep this main curve here. I'm going to run the split tool and select this one, and now we can take these here and lock it. Take these here, and let's go ahead and lock everything else as well. There are 2 ways to create this. You can go with the sweep 2 rail. Just make sure you click on close sweep. You can see that it gives you this result. There's nothing wrong with this. This will give you a different shape. You can see that it goes in and back out. I'm going to undo it, run it again, and just to show you, if we hit maintain height and keep your eye on this part right here, close sweep, and look what maintain height does. Not much, okay, but you get the idea. Another thing you can do is use network surface. Why isn't it working? Maybe I gotta split it. Yes, you gotta split it. So, oh, is that sweep 2? Sorry, that's network surface. You can see now that it has a different result. Again, figure out which one works for you. Okay, so in my case, let's see how this works. I kind of want this result. But I do like what happened in the last one. So you know what? We'll go with the last one. So at least you know there's 3 different ways, or 2 different ways to create your upper body. So we'll use a 2 rail sweep, closed. We don't need to maintain. Let's see what both does. It just bulges out a tiny bit. So maintaining height, I guess, is good. Just select this. You can always go to Analyze, Surface, and Environmental Map just to study your surface. You want to make sure there's no pinching anywhere, so it looks like everything is kosher. So let's continue. From here, I'm going to now select our finger cutter and create the puncture hole here. So we'll open up the body. So I'm going to extrude it. I'll hit S so it doesn't become solid. And now we can split with the cutter, deselect and delete. You can see we have the upper body already set. I'm studying this real quick. You can see that there's a little bit of an issue here where it dips and dips in. We don't want this. We kind of want it to be a seamless transition to our shank at the bottom, so we have to do a little bit of editing here. So I will show you the steps that I take to make it work. Now the most important part of creating the final part of the shank is to determine the width of the bottom. Okay, so what I usually do is I know for a fact that the spring guard that I use is anywhere between and you can go anywhere between 1.5 to 2 to as much as 4 millimeters wide for a spring guard. That's 2 by 1 millimeter stick. So I already know that I want to use a 2 millimeter spring guard, and the thickness of the metal will be 1. So automatically I will just go with 4. So just type in 2. That goes both sides, by the way, so that's a total of 4. Okay, and the next thing is to create the a guide curve that goes down. So I'll use the line vertical, just because I don't want to go switch back to the front view. You know, I'm going to stay in perspective as much as possible. You can go with the oval tool here. Just create your 3 points to create the bottom half of the oval. I'm going to split it. You can see we already have the cross section to create the bottom part of the shank. The next step is to now, what I want to do is create a, well, first we're going to switch to the right view and let's study this shank here. Remember I told you that we want this curvature to have a nice transition towards this part here. I don't like what it's doing here, where it curves nicely, then bends, it evens out, then bends back in right there. I know it's very slight, but it doesn't look good to me. You'll see what I mean when it's finished. So let's take a look where it starts to be towards the area before it starts to bend. I think it's roughly around here. So I'm going to go with a line from midpoint. I'll snap somewhere here and just pull across. We can move it later. Okay, I'll just move it up to somewhere here. Looks good. Let's check this view real quick. Yeah, maybe, oops. Maybe we can grab this one and pull it down a little bit. I do want to create a surface using a gumball, so I'll grab this little ball here, pull it to the right, hold shift and let go to create that surface. Let's go ahead and split with the plane and deselect just the top. You can see now the transition is sharper. There is no dipping back in. The only thing now is to figure out a way to create a curve that blends to this bottom part here. What I usually do next is I select these curves, the shank curve, the cross section, and the body, and again lock everything else. I do want to create a duplicate of this edge. I want to split the curve somewhere here. I don't want it to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to smash it right on the project, on the C-plane, and I don't want it to have a double curve, especially when I'm projecting it from this view here. I'll show you what I mean later. So let's go ahead and just run, I have a hotkey for split at the point. It's Control-Alt-P, or yeah, Control-Alt-P. And what it does is that it runs a split tool. You can see my command line. Then over here it immediately goes to the point. So I could just simply select the curve, run the command, and find where I want it to split. Now when I deselect that curve, all I have is that part of that curve. You see what I mean? Now I'm going to switch to the right view, and I want to use the project to C-plane command. I have a hotkey for it as well. Delete input, you want to say yes. Let's go now and switch back to the perspective. You can see that we do have the curve smashed into the C-plane, exactly what I wanted. The next step now is to transition this to the bottom here. There are two ways to do it. I'll show you the first way. The first way is to run the blend tool directly to that end. You have a few options. You can go with tangency, curve, or you can go with tangency at number 1, then point at number 2. So it has this kind of transition. You could pull this down as much as you want, but you don't want to overextend past this point here, because it's going to create the dipping in result. So this is one way. You can see it's nice. Another way, if I hit escape, is to draw a vertical line from that end right down, just like this. And then when we run the blend tool again, back to the tangency, you can see that it creates a really nice curvature. You can actually pull this if you want. Again, you don't want it to over past this point. Okay, so that's actually pretty cool. I'm gonna work it a little bit more. Okay, that looks pretty good. Again, you could build it any way you want. Just make sure follow these steps so it has a nice transition. The next thing is to create the curve, so we can create the outer part of this shank. Alright, so I'm going to grab this finger size guide, this curve I just created, and I'm going to go to the middle mouse, and I have this tool that I love to use, is curve from two views. When I click it, it's going to create that curve just like this. Okay, then from here, let's go ahead and mirror to the other side. See, all right, that looks pretty good. Now, let's go ahead and just first unlock our scene. We'll select all the curves like you see here in the middle, and let's go with these two curves on the side I just created, the cross section, the finger size guide, and the upper body. And this time I want to hide it. It's starting to get a little populated, and plus I want you to see what I'm doing. All right, so let's first duplicate this edge right here and the one in the back. We'll hit enter and join just to make sure this one is joined. And now we can select this curve, run the split tool with these curves as the cutters. Alright, now that we set it up for network surface, let's go ahead and select just these curves like you see here. Then I'll run network surface. Okay, you can see that the transition is really nice. It comes right down to the bottom very seamlessly. But again, it's nowhere near done, because let me show you now what some of the results are. So let's go ahead and just join it up. I'm going to go to the analyze, or I'll show you where I found it. So surface environment map. If we look at this surface here, you can see very slightly, there's this, I don't know if you see it, I'm going to wiggle around the screen a bit. You can look at the detail here. There's a little bit of a pinching going on. There it is. You see it? Right there. See that pinching? Again, it's not a big deal if you were to cast it. Most of you will probably say it's fine. But if you want to know how I make it really clean, here are the steps. Okay, so if you don't feel like you need to learn this, just move ahead to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and bring back our scene, select the body and the finger curve, and hide everything else once again. What I usually do is I create a plane and draw it just like that. Then I run the split tool, use the plane as the cutter, and now I can just delete. First I have to extract, these two surfaces so they're exposed. Okay, so the bottom is completely exposed, just like this. This is going to be our one of the tricks that I use to make surfaces seamless. Okay, the first thing you need to do is run the blend tool, or blend curve tool, on the side. Okay, you don't have to do anything at all, just make sure it's tangent on 1 and 2. Mirror it to the other side. But keep in mind, if I switch to the front view, most of the time it's not sitting on the finger. You can see that it's blending way inside the finger. So you kind of have to push this curve to sit on the finger, or the surface will look really warped. Okay. The way I do that is I select the finger curve. I use the gumball and I create a surface. I'll select these two curves and I will just pull it onto that surface. And now when I switch back to the front view, you can see that the finger curve is sitting directly on that finger size. Okay, so that's a really wonderful trick. Definitely work and practice on it. It's very useful. Okay, so that's it for the sides. The next thing now is to apply a blend surface command. So we'll run blend surface. Let's do it again. You'll see that it's on curvature. I usually like to work with tangency most of the time. A couple of things you'll have to keep in mind. You'll see that it's starting to warp or wiggle. It's not a bad thing. The only thing you can do now is you can actually adjust this. You can actually tilt it to angle towards close to the finger. All right, so I'm going to hold Alt and just grab that. Let's do it again. If you hold Alt, you can actually swivel that thing inward, just like that. Just hit left click to get out. That looks like it needs to pull in a bit, so hold Alt and just tilt it in. Go to the other side. It doesn't have to be perfect, just get it close to that finger curve. So hold Alt and swivel it in. That looks like it needs to come out. Okay, so I'll do the same. Yep, pull that back out. When that's done, just hit Enter or Apply. You can see now that we have a blended curve. The only problem is it doesn't blend on the outside. What I usually do now is I create extraction of curves here, and I'm going to run network surface one more time. So I need a center line here. I don't want to trust just extracting from the mid, so I always like to go to the vertical plane and pull that down, select that surface, run intersect, and now there's a center line. Okay, so let me first put this on a layer so you're not confused. You can see it better. Alright, then just on one side, let's go with the extract isocurve command. Just going to put some here just to give it enough definition. Alright, then I'll delete it. We'll select everything on the right side minus the middle and the side and just mirror it over. I'm going to duplicate this edge and this edge. And now we have set it up for network surface. Let's go apply it, delete the curves. Let's go ahead and just mirror it to the other side. Okay, just to show you, if you go to environment, you can see that there's nothing, no pinching or whatever. It's a really good way to keep your models tight. Okay, it's a good way to work as a really clean modeler. The next step is to create the border of the finger. So what I'll do is just offset the finger curve to create a surface. You can go ahead and hide the size guide here. We'll select the body. I'm going to duplicate the border. Just keep the curves on the edge of the finger holes. I'm going to select only the curves, and I'm going to offset using the pipe tool. I don't like to offset on a surface because it tends to give me weird results. The only thing that really guarantees, on my case, a perfect offset is piping a curve on a surface. So I told you before I want to keep, or I don't know if I did, but I want to keep the thickness of the metal to be 1 or 0.8. So you kind of want to offset that finger border on the inside a little farther than the wall. So if I'm going with 1 or 0.8, go with something like 1.2 or 1 if you're using a 0.8 thickness. Alright, so I'm going to pipe it and make sure you're on radius, and we'll type in 1.2. Okay, the curves are still selected on the outer rim, so just deselect it and select the two surfaces and the extrusion pipe. We'll run intersect, and you see it has two curves. We just want to keep the inside, and you can delete the pipe. So if we look at the inside here, we actually have the border lines that will create the surface for the inner part. So select that, run the split tool, select these 4 curves. Oh, one more to go. Okay, so select the middle and the 2 outer, and now that we have the, you can see we have the border surfaces. Let's go ahead and select the curves and delete them. Now I'm going to select the main body, and I'm going to offset the surface, but I don't want to be offsetting with a solid. So make sure it says solid no. I want to flip it, so hit F and right click to go inward with the arrows, and we'll go with a 1 millimeter offset. Okay, so there it is. The only thing left to do now is to blend the border curve to the actual inner offset. Okay, so I'm going to select just the border surfaces and the inner, and lock everything else. You can see this is what we need to blend together. So I'll select, let's see what happened. Okay, we'll select these 2 surfaces. I'm going to offset. This time I will make sure solid yes is on, and the offset, we can go with a low number like 0.8. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and just extract the outer surfaces. And now I can do split on both of them. So I'll select the body, split with the border, then we'll select these two here and split it with that. Looks like we have some weird issues here, so let me go back, see what happened. It looks like they're not intersecting properly, especially here. Okay, so let me show you some troubleshooting tips. What I usually do is I select the surface and just duplicate the border, select just the inner curve like there, and let's just go ahead and pipe it. Okay, you don't have to do the offset. Okay, if the offset and the split works for you, cool. If not, then this is another way to troubleshoot. So just simply pipe it with a decent, a pretty good number, like start with 0.5, and hopefully it will intersect to give you the separation of both surfaces. So select this pipe, split it with the tube we just created. Yeah, see, it has a nice separation. That's perfect. Okay, you do not want to affect this width here. You want to maintain the 1.2 millimeter border. Okay, it's mainly for comfort. Now all we need to do is join these surfaces together. So just go ahead and let's go ahead with just a blend surface command. I'll apply blend surface. We'll start with that. You'll see that it's not chaining around, so hit chain edges. Might not work, so let's try a different route. I'm gonna go with a dupe border again. Just keep the inner curves. Let's try sweep 2 rail. So just create a cross-section line going across. Apply 2 rail sweep. Just join it. Looks like it worked. Do the same on the other side. I don't trust mirroring it because you never know if your surface is wrong on the other side. I'm just taking that chance, you know what I mean? There you go. So go ahead and just join it. Unlock our scene. Go ahead and just join everything. Alright, so this part is done. Okay, so now we can focus on the upper part. I'm going to bring everything else back. To close this, it's pretty simple. Just sweep this thing around. I'm going to move that seam inside so you don't see it. It's just a thing that I like to do. Alright, so looks pretty good. I'm not sure if you like this kind of transition. You can definitely work on that, so let's go ahead and just hide everything else. I kind of do want this to transition to that upper part here, so I'm going to extract this surface like you see here. I'll change the direction so it's looking like this. Go and just use the surface from planar to make it a surface. I'm going to scale it up. Let's lock that surface, and what I want to do is I want to cut this inner surface because it's kind of wobbly. If you see it, see how it's like wobbly? So I want to flatten it out. So if I'm looking at this view, I just want to expose a little bit on this side here. Okay, so select the body, plane, intersect. Just keep this curve, that will be our cutting curve. Delete the plane. Let's go ahead and just split that with that inner cutter curve. Bring everything else back. I do want to transition this to the shank because I'm not feeling this weirdness to it, you know, it doesn't look very attractive. Again, we're building this from scratch, so we don't really have any direction. It's mainly to show you basic techniques of building complex surfaces. You know, I'll be doing a series of these as I go in future videos. Okay, so select the plane, the body. Again, you'll see it's pretty repetitive once you get the flow of what I'm doing. All right, so split it with that to expose that, and we'll split this to expose this. Go ahead and cut that inner part right there, so you can see we have that. Now we can actually start blending. Okay, so let's try blending this. Go with the blend tool, select this, then the upper. I want this to be tangent, I want this to be point, so we're going to make sure 1 is tangent and 2 is point. can see the transition looks just like this. Let's go ahead and apply it. This I want it to be tangent on both sides. So let's go around. Why isn't it going around? Might have to chain the edges, so let's try chaining the edges. There we go. We want to make sure they're both at tangent. Actually, we can make the upper one, which is 2 point. Should be fine. There we go. So now we can actually select everything, join it. It's if we select the curves, delete it. If you look in your command line, it's one closed surface. It's nice and clean. It's actually ready to be cast. The only thing left to do now is to let's see. Let's bring back our. Where's our stone? Did I delete it? I mean, where's our side stone? Oh, there it is. Okay, so the only thing left to do now is to create the cutter. One easy way to create a cutter is to go with a 3-point circle. Find 3 points anywhere around the stone. And draw a point right at the base here of this culet. Select the stone. Run the loft tool. I have a hotkey for that as well. Let's just go here. Run the extrude. Turn off both sides. Just pull it up just like this. Run join. There you go. There's our cutter. One last thing is just to array this around. Do want to create a guide here because you want to make sure when you space these cutters that there is a distance between the stone, and the distance I like to use is let me first draw it. I like to make sure that the distance between both stones is 0.2, so I'm going to draw a 2-point circle, type in 0.2 as a diameter, and when I array it I want to make sure, let me just manually move it, I want to make sure that the cutters are between 0.2 or close to 0.2 between spacing. Alright, so we'll select this, the body and the curve, lock everything else. Well, we'll minus that. We want to make sure that the guide is selected as well. I'm going to use the Array CRV tool. I'm going to use ghosted so we can see actually the curve right on the inside there. Select the curve, run Array CRV, hit the letter B, right click, and it will select just the quad right there on that curve. Select the curve, and now we know that the stone I think is 1.5. Distance between the stone is 0.2, so let's guesstimate that the distance is 1.7. I'm just guessing here, okay? Number I have is 28. I'm going to scroll down and back up. Remember I said we need 1.7, so if we go down, it's at 1.7. So let's see if that spaces correctly. It's actually pretty good. It's actually on point. All the spacing around the stone is maintained to be in or around 0.2. You could see it right there. Okay, I'm quite happy with it. The only thing left to do now is to take this body here. Let's go ahead and run the bowling difference with yes. Okay, you can see that we now have the seats for the stones to be placed. They can actually cut the cut downs, make the prongs, and in my practice I don't like to add prongs myself. I'd rather have the jeweler solder in like the 4 or 6 prong setup. You know, it's just cleaner, so I never put prongs. You might want to add it yourself. By all means, it's your practice. More power to you. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do one more thing before I end the video. You can see that the edge of this ring is very sharp. I do want it to be a little more comfortable, so let's go ahead and just run the fillet tool. I'm going to type in a moderate distance like 0.3. Make sure chain edges is activated, and it will wrap all the way around. Just hit enter or right click until it creates that fillet. Nice and comfortable. Go ahead and run it again on the other side. Make sure chain edges is selected. Okay, one more time. Alright. You can see that the inside has the spacing to add that spring guard. The ring is gorgeous. I would definitely give it a pass for production if this is something I'm designing or told to design. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save the file. You can see that with these techniques you can create something really spectacular in the amount of time that I made it in. Okay, again, I'm using hotkeys to move much quicker than most people do. Maybe if you work this way, then great. Again, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. If you have any comments, suggestions, or critiques, by all means, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to see more videos, please hit the subscribe button. Please share with your friends. I do need the support. And again, I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much.